Well, welcome. And my name is Rhys. I'm Executive Director of Public Impact at the National Housing Federation. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Terrie Alafat, Chair at Riverside, very well known to the sector. Previously, of course, Chief Executive at the Chartered Institute of Housing. Welcome, Terrie. Really nice to see you. Terrie this year will be chairing our Board Excellence Conference on 3rd and 4th of February, which is being held in Manchester, as well as virtually. I'm just going to give a quick overview of some of the topics that we'll be covering during the conference in February. The agenda is already shaping up to be really fascinating, a really broad set of issues that we are looking at. There'll be sessions looking at the future direction of travel for the sector as we come out of this phase of the pandemic, sessions on preparing for the new regulatory environment. Levelling up, I think, will be a really key theme in the conference. What role housing can play in the levelling up agenda. We'll be looking at changes in demographics, the zero carbon challenge and decarbonisation, quality of existing homes, and the role of the board in creating an inclusive and diverse culture. So quite a lot on the cards for conference on the 3rd and 4th of February. The room, of course, will be full, we hope, of board members, of chairs, and also we really welcome governance teams from our member organisations at the event. So really a broad range of people in the room. So that's just a flavour of how the agenda is shaping up, but really interested, Terrie, to get your views on both kind of where we find ourselves at this point as we come out of this first phase of the pandemic and reflections on where the sector finds itself, but also to hear what you're most looking forward to in terms of gathering again in Manchester. So maybe we'll start with that, just some general reflections from you on where we find ourselves, where housing associations find themselves as we come out of this phase of the pandemic, and any changes that you've seen in the last 18 months or so that have had a significant impact on the sector.
Thanks so much, Rhys. And I am really looking forward to this conference as well. I suppose, I think for all of us, on boards really is the last 18 months have been particularly challenging because we've needed to work extra hard with keeping in touch with our businesses, not being able to meet in person, not being able to get out and about to visit homes and meet our residents has left, many of us worried a bit about how in touch, we'd really like to be. And of course, on top of that, I think for all of us on boards, we really had to focus on ensuring that we continue to deliver day-to-day services. And of course, there have been some new challenges with that, in terms of our own staff, new ways of working, recruitment and retention. And of course, I'll come back to that, but an increasing issue, I think, for all of us. And of course, just the whole issue around morale. And, this has been ongoing, hasn't it? We keep thinking it's over and then it's not over. And I look forward to the coming year because I think it's going to continue to be challenging. And of course, for our customers, how do we explain to our customers the start and stop of services? So I think, it's been a really interesting 18 months. And I think there have been some shifts in the way that we're thinking about things. I think the first thing I would say is I think there's just more focus on our existing stock and our existing residents and our neighborhoods. I think it's our core business, and that's what I think people are really focusing on. So yes, there's building safety issues. We know zero carbon and climate change, which will be covered in the conference. I think all of us are beginning to think, gosh, how are we going to get there? And of course, increased expectations in customers and in terms of our delivery and the quality of the housing that we have. I think the other big change, of course, is increased scrutiny on what we're doing. I mean, we know that the ombudsman, and I see that Rick's going to be here at the conference, the approach they're taking is far more active than I think we might say a few years ago. We've got television programs like the ITV program that really are holding us to account when we get it wrong. And so, one of the big issues for us on boards, and I'm sure all boards are asking these questions, how do we get assurance on these kinds of issues? And then, as I mentioned, of course, customer and resident expectations are increasing. And of course, we're going to have a new regulatory regime with the consumer regulation. And again, I can see that we're going to have a good session on that at the program. But, how are we, going to be really ahead of the game? I think most of us in boards are really thinking, what are we doing in terms of shaping our agenda, our approach to resident engagement? How do we ensure the consumers are at the center of what we do? Our customers are at the center of what we're doing. And I wouldn't want to, sometimes we forget really about, a year ago, how much community activism was around. We've had Black Lives Matter, but also a lot of things around the women's movement and, in just being ahead in terms of what we do around the diversity, the way we approach diversity and the way we approach some of these really powerful issues. How are we in touch with our communities? How do we understand really some of these broader issues and the sort of strength of feeling that's coming out through some of the activism that we've seen. And again, the government's still expecting us to deliver a lot. We've had a change in government, or I shouldn't say a change in government, a change in ministers. And that'll be interesting to see in terms of how it plays out. And we know there's going to be some, expectations around new housing, but also how do we balance? How do we make those decisions around our existing stock, zero carbon, and some of those, and building new housing? And of course, we see that a lot of housing associations are focusing a bit less on numbers. It's not the number, it's what we're building and where we're building and how we're building it. And then, finally, I would just say that what we do, the provision of both, our specific services, support services, affordable housing, we're certainly still in demand, aren't we? Homelessness has not gone away. And indeed, there are even bigger challenges and in many areas increasing. And the people that live in our communities are having trouble affording, their rent and food. So all those issues about our rent increases and how we work in communities, changes in welfare or, the universal credit changes, that's got to also be really, really central. And I guess that what that means is how do we ensure we have a strong voice with government when we look at the wide range of policies that can affect what we deliver. But, I look forward to the coming year. I think, there are some opportunities, but some really big challenges for us. And so this conference is really a chance for us to be sharing our thoughts about that and how we're taking it forward.
Thanks so much, Terrie. That's a fantastic sort of zoom out, looking at the sector and the range and the breadth of challenges that organisations have been facing and clearly that boards will be contending with. I think that point about trade-offs and about competing priorities is absolutely key. Maybe you could say a bit more about those opportunities you mentioned, and looking ahead. Of course, the sector has had. The last 2 years has been challenging for everybody. I think there's a general sense that housing associations stepped up during the pandemic and really delivered for their residents. Interested in what we can learn from this period, and also what those opportunities are that you might see on the horizon, particularly for board members.
Well, I think, one of the things that we did demonstrate through the pandemic is how we respond in a crisis. And we all know that, the obvious one about us talking about digital, access to our services and opening access through digitalization, working in different ways. And of course, that's exactly what we did during the pandemic. And I think most of us are holding on to those lessons. So I think that was one really positive thing. I think the second thing is I mentioned the sort of challenges around staff and staff retention. And we know that in some services like care and support, that might be particularly difficult, but I mean, also in some of the issues around repair and building and whatever. So I think maybe the second thing, and I think certainly our board at Riverside spent a lot of time thinking about our staff and how are we growing our staff? How are we recruiting? How are we bringing in young people into the profession? And something I still feel passionate about, even though it's been a number of years since I've been chief executive of the Chartered Institute, but it's a great career. And how do we really focus on those sorts of things? And, many of us in going back to some additional office working, and of course our frontline staff have been out there all the time anyway, but that whole kind of hybrid way of working, how do we manage that in such a way that improves the services to our customers? And I guess the other opportunity, and I think we have a very, we are in a strong position, if you think about it, in terms of, for many of us, strong financial strengths. We are really well based in the community. We have some strong partnerships. We know how to work together. There are many, many examples of wonderful things that the organizations do. So it's something about how do we build on all of that going forward. But there are challenges, but I think we're in a pretty good position to take on those challenges and work together, going forward.
Terrie, could you tell us a bit about what you're most looking forward to at this conference? I know it's already shaping up to be a packed agenda. And are there any particular sessions or speakers that you're looking out for?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to what I said at the beginning, I'm just really looking forward to meet other people in person. It's funny. I took on the chairmanship of Riverside during COVID, and you just miss that informal contact with other people, the sort of stuff you pick up over coffee, and just kind of getting to know what other organizations are doing, and the common issues and whatever. So I think that's really, really good. I'm also looking forward to, for myself personally, to learn a bit more about specific subjects. I can't say I'm a zero carbon expert. Every time I talk to people, they tell me about the kind of upcoming technologies and all those sorts of things. So I think sometimes it's difficult to stay on top of some of those latest developments. And I guess finally, there's something about future scoping as well, because one of the things we do on boards is actually we always ask the what ifs and try to, with all our scenario planning and all those things we do as part of budgeting, trying to sort of to think about the future, think about, as organizations, we're here for the long term. And it's about, yes, dealing with the here and now, but also doing some of that. So I'm looking forward to all of that. The sessions that I've looked at the agenda, and I mean, I think I have to say it looks fantastic. The whole agenda looks fantastic. I'm intrigued by a couple of sessions. I think one session in particular is how the unthinkable triggered the unimaginable. And what a great title, first of all. But I'm also thinking in the context of boards, having to think into the future, having to think about the things that you just wouldn't expect to have happened. And we've had some, as we know, we've had some major events over the last few years. So, where will that session focus and how will we do that? So I thought that was fantastic. The other session I was really interested in was the peer-to-peer roundtable that's organized on this session, which is where we talk about our tenants at the heart of everything we do, but easier said than done. And I'm sure we're all thinking about that. How do we ensure that we're listening to things? But I have to say it's hard to choose. And I'm really looking forward, because all of the specific sessions on these key issues are things that I'm going to really, really look forward to.
Thank you so much, Terrie, and really excited to see you in person too at conference. Thanks for taking the time to join us in this conversation. Just wanted to say for anyone who's at the start of their career as a non-exec, or if you just want to refresh your knowledge ahead of the main conference, but also running a virtual board academy, and that's happening on the 26th of January. And the virtual academy is about providing you with the essentials on what you need to know to excel as a housing association board member. They're really fantastic, really focused, useful events, and that's on the 26th of January. Otherwise, really looking forward to welcoming you to Manchester, or if you're joining us virtually, on the 3rd and 4th of February for the Board Excellence in Housing 2022. Thank you all, and thanks ever so much, Terrie.
Thanks so much.